managers group page.
We're streaming now on YouTube.
Yeah, be live momentarily. All right, I'm going to go on mute.
And you'll send me that link so I can.
Yes.
For YouTube.
Bye guys. I'm muting myself now.
All right.
What are we gonna do without Brittany and Dan?
I don't know.
I'm lost.
At this point, we're a captainless ship. Got the link.
You want to just go performance art and just do this for the full hour?
Just do it. Yeah, it's like some John Cage 433 thing.
Right.
We'll just sit here. Yeah. I don't know when we're supposed to start, but I guess momentarily.
It's 3:59.
Yeah, we'll give it another minute or two.
Ralph, if you want to share the RJM post to your page while you're waiting, just share it now.
It's on Facebook right now.
Yeah, it's on our office page.
Yeah, I can't share this, Britt.
Not the RJM one?
Nope.
Should be able to.
That's right. If George does it, I could go in through that way.
I did it through Twitter.
Okay.
I see a share button on it.
All right.
Well, do it.
Dan, do we know how many people are everybody's ready to go?
We're all set. People are watching on YouTube. Take it away.
Great. Oh my God, we're just three faces. Hi, this is Ralph Jacket, and I am a manager for lots of years here in Boston, and I teach at the Berklee College of Music. I'm here with colleague George Howard, and George has a long career in the music business. Ryko Disc, he's a consultant, he's a professor, he's an in-demand speaker and a writer. A raconteur, as they say.
Yeah, I like that. Most people don't know what that word means, but yes.
And it's an old school thing, but and George and I share an office at Berklee, and boy, it's I have him on Google alerts because when George talks and writes, it's brilliant. And I love George on panels, so I'm really glad he's here. And then my friend Jim Lucchese is joining me as well. And Jim, one of my students interviewed him when he was running a company called Echo Nest that was in the Boston area. And that was sold to Spotify. And then Jim and I became friends. We would have lunch, and he is in a band called the Kemp Harris Group, and he's a great drummer. And we have a real valued friendship. And Jim recently took over a company called Sofar Sounds, which I think is about a 10-year-old, 11-year-old company out of London, and that a lot of people are hip to. So I brought these two guys together because the Boston Managers Group was started years ago, about 27 years ago, by Tim Collins, who was managing Aerosmith at the time. And I was just starting my career, maybe 30 years ago it was. And Tim was a mentor, and he became a friend. And we started this Boston Managers Group to kind of help managers get together, because we work in an office and we think about our artists, and we're kind of insular as far as just, you know, we think with blinders on about our artists and our business. And then when we get together with other managers and people in the business, our mind kind of expands. And that was something we've been doing for years at Newbury Comics. And then after Newbury Comics, we went to Harvard Law School. Brian Price used to host us. And for about 7 years that I've been at Berkeley, we try to have the meetings at Berkeley, but man, Berkeley, it's hard to get space because there's so many damn musicians and they need space and performance areas. So it's hard to get space at Berkeley. And this pandemic thing has opened up all of our eyes to what the virtual world is. And I'm really, really excited about bringing these meetings to a bigger audience, and that of people like George and Jim would have to get in their cars, drive to somewhere, park, meet for an hour or so, and then do the reverse. And it was just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. So it's really good to have you guys here. And thank you for Dan and Brittany to help. And thanks for everybody that's watching. We have about 30 or so questions that came in beforehand. And my job is to introduce the session, throw a softball question, and then get out of the way, because I want Jim and George to, I want them to have most of this meeting. We're going to last about an hour or so. So the softball question, first of all, there was a question that came in late that was, how is George so handsome? And
Hard to know.
it was written by George Howard. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hard to know.
The second question is basically, let's go off. Let's get an easy one. What's the music industry going to be like in 1 year? And that means like, what's going to go on with venues? What's going to go on with touring? What's going to go on with A&R? What's going to go on with tech? Where are we going to be? What's a year from now look like? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh man, well first, before we get into that impossible to answer question, you said a softball and it's like, oh, what's the square root of pi? George, quick, in your head. First off, I want to say thank you to you, Ralph. I'm honored to call you a colleague, but lucky to call you a friend. And you're just an amazing human being. And what you've done with this group, what you've done for the community, and what you're doing for students is it's like it's just at a whole nother level. So thank you for this, and thank you for having me. And Jim, thanks for taking the time amidst all of this. It's crazy times. I would say, I think that it's always a bad idea to try to, finding that balance between prognostication and being nimble is in some respects kind of one of the core secrets, or such as it is, of business. COVID-19 was not anything that anyone really could have predicted the kind of scale of it. What we do know, the only thing we do know, is that the market will continuously change. COVID-19 is an accelerant. A lot of things that probably wouldn't have lasted anyway are just not going to last as long now. New things will emerge. I look at I wrote a piece recently for Forbes about what to do when the market, how do you go to market when the market disappears? And I think that it's forcing us all to kind of confront certain realities that maybe we didn't want to, but that is really the role of not only artists, but also of good business people, which Jim is at the top of the game. So I'm not going to prognosticate. I think it's much more interesting to think about what can we be doing now? What are the habits and trends that we're seeing now? And Jim, you've got boots on the ground. I mean, you had to wake up one day and go, okay, our entire business model, or the vast majority of it, is now not something we can do. So we can talk 25,000 foot view of what this looks like in 6 months, or we can hear from somebody who's like, yeah, I'm dealing with this on every second. So I'd love to hear kind of what you're addressing, because that's the big question. What do live musicians do right now when the market disappears?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the way you described it is the way we've talked about it on our team. And that is that energy that goes into predicting what the world's going to look like in 3, 6, 12, 18 months is, I wouldn't say it's wasted energy, but there's a law of diminishing returns. Like we can prepare for a couple of different potential scenarios, but all the energy has to focus on the other part that you talked about, and that is just being flexible, being more agile and nimble to be able to respond. And when you think what we did, so you have so far, I think a lot of people watching probably know, but we're a global community that puts on intimate concerts in about 400 plus cities around the world. Typical show is 3 artists. You show up, you don't know who's going to play. Diverse lineup. Each plays about a 25-minute set. Short breaks in between. We were doing about 1,500 shows a month in February. And we record a handful of those shows, about 10 a night around the world, and put them on YouTube, basically. So we are an intimate concert, music-focused business. And what happens on YouTube and the videos are really a way to take what happens in that room, which is by definition, it's ephemeral and it's small and you had to be there. And that's what makes that a special gig for artists, because it's a listening room, and for the audience because it's a listening room and it's so connected. The video is just a way to help what happened in that room reach a lot more people for those artists, to give it more promotional power. That's what we've been doing.
So can I pause you there for 1 second? And I don't want to
cool.
screw with your flow, but like you're the CEO of Sofar. You're not the founder, right? And I've certainly been aware of Sofar Sounds for a long time. And all of my work, my life, my teaching, my writing, whatever is kind of driven by this guiding principle of purpose, not product, right? Like that. Can you just? It always felt to me that Sofar was a very kind of purpose-driven company. Like again, I never met the founder. I don't know anything more than what any observer would kind of see. But I'm just sort of like, as we level set here about the changes that we're going to make, the one way that I do think you navigate these choppy waters is to kind of reel back into what the actual purpose of what you were doing it for in the first place is, because the product will always change. So maybe you can talk a little about the origins of Sofar.
I mean, I think that's totally true. And this situation has forced a level of clarity around that purpose that that nothing else in my experience has ever done. But to quickly give you the background, no, I'm not a founder of the company. Rafe, who's one of the co-founders and chairman now, and two buddies started it 11 years ago in London. Rafe's a music fan. His buddy Dave is a musician, and they were both sick of going to shitty club dates, basically. And started doing living room shows. They didn't invent the idea of living room shows. They've been going on for a long time, and didn't set out to start a business, right? I think what happened is they were doing these in London with their circle of friends. They grew and became more popular. They're all past the hat. A couple of those friends moved to different cities, started doing them. They called it Sofar Sounds. And that grew organically, word of mouth, for 7 years. Nobody sold a ticket. And, all the money basically was past the hat in the room. And that's how it grew, to a point where at that point it was in definitely north of 100 cities, probably in the several hundred cities range. All the shows were past the hat. And then one day they said, do you think people would buy a ticket? Right. I mean, they had in lots of places, like in India today, if you want to go to a Sofar show, it's still past the hat. It's very difficult to get a ticket because there's probably 20 people who want to go for everyone who's randomly selected. So you actually have to apply. So they started selling $20 tickets, or 20, I guess like 15 pounds sterling in London. People bought tickets. I wonder if people.
Isn't that amazing? When you find product market fit, and you have a problem that you think, you know what, this would be something I might like. I'm going to maybe try to see if others would. And you get, business speak, this net promoter score. And then you say, oh, would people pay for it? Isn't it funny that some, and business people, myself included, we spend our lives banging our heads against the wall trying to find that product market fit. And so often it's the customer creating something that they themselves would like, and then people tell others, and then your job is, okay, now how do we scale this thing, which is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah,
But
and what you're scaling is, to go back to your point, it's a deeply mission-driven community.
right.
Where still in 300 of the 400 and some odd cities we're in, it's still past the hat, and
Sure.
and it's essentially a kind of a non-commercial entity in all those places. But because we're making money in other areas, we're able to improve how you put on shows in Northern Mongolia or in Bangalore or in other places that are still today, pay what you want. So the mission of the company is to create these spaces where music matters, where music's the focal point. What attracted me to Sofar was looking at it in the context of a gig, and the fact that there is a full room of strangers who are open-minded enough to want to check out in pin drop silence 3 bands they have never heard of before, and to play to one of those audiences. So the experience of playing to a listening room, everyone who's done it, it's a special feeling, especially when it's in a non-traditional space and often without amplification. I mean, you feel really close to the audience.
I'm going to pause you again there. And, I'm sitting here looking at you, and you've got drums behind you. I got guitars behind me. So you said what appealed to you about Sofar, which I guess means, as first as a customer, and then as someone who, as the CEO. And Ralph, yeah, there's this thing that I just want to tattoo on my head these days, which are the 3 words Dunning-Kruger effect. And what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, this idea that because I'm smart in one realm, or an expert in one realm, that smart is transferable to another realm. That's not true. And in the music industry, you see this all the time. So you talk about values and purpose. It's not a coincidence that you're, as a drummer, are attracted to this and understand this. And too often in the music industry and every other industry, higher education, etc., you have these practitioners who are divorced from the actual customer, and you lose that kind of purpose completely. So it really kind of hit me when you said what attracted you to them. It's the same thing that attracted them to you, right? And that's how the kind of purpose merges. And it goes back to that kind of founding ethos. One of them was a musician. Shocking, right? So as we envision the future of what the job to be done is for music, maybe we need to listen more to some artists every once in a while, instead of people that have no connection to that market.
So that's why the orthodontist never succeeded at starting a nightclub. Is that correct, George?
I don't know.
Or I see it all the time. Like whoever, you have a pile of money and you start a restaurant or a nightclub because you like that. And you think
typically, no, it's that sort of, but it's the person has made a lot of money in some other field. I'm a banker. Now I'm going to go apply that same thing to the music industry. And that's not to say that bankers can't do great things, but there's this level, it's innovators' dilemma. There's this level of ego that refuses to allow you to actually get close to the market and understand what the customers need. And that's why I was pushing Jim a little bit on, like, why does this company even exist? Because I think that's what will guide us even as the technologies and the landscape changes.
Yeah, I think for us, we are a community where at a given show, what comes together for that show is not just people who bought tickets for the show, but the show organizers, the hosts and venues, and then of course the artists. And when I joined, my feeling is if you focus on the artist as our customer, the rest of it falls into place, right? I think everybody else in that room feels like the artist is the customer, and you wouldn't exist without the artist. So we spent a lot of the last year building a new team, or adding to the team, and building some tech and tools to make sure our artists feel like they're our customer.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. I mean, so before all this happened, there was a shitty TechCrunch kind of piece that went out there that made, to my mind, spurious accusations about revenue flow and all of those types of things, and tried to kind of position after you all took some funding and good friends with one of the funders, and I know where his values are. So you want to talk through at this point, like any of that, because I think it will lead us also to where the general business model is.
Yeah. So my favorite article. We raised $25 million last year with this vision of scaling Sofar with a focus on artist as customer. And we're going to raise a bunch of money. We're going to hire a bunch of people, many of whom have a lot of experience building products and services specifically for musicians. And we're going to continue to scale what we've been doing, and that is selling tickets. So that's, as you know, George, raising money around a vision like that, particularly when our focus is for local and independent musicians, ain't easy. You're absolutely right in that I was lucky enough to have friendships with a number of investors who just want to make a dent in this world and want to build.
You're modest. You're lucky, but you also had a good deal of success with your prior company, Echo Nest. So,
which does, I will say, adds a little bit of almost irrationality the other way, in the fact that you can get some people to take some bets with you that maybe otherwise would be harder to do.
It is all part of life's rich pageant,
that's right.
as Peter Sellers and REM once said. Yes.
But looking towards a world where you've got more artists who have more autonomy, have more control over how they grow their careers, how they engage with fans. That's basically what was driving it. And doing that in the live space is incredibly difficult. Looking at a community of, over 1 million people who have been putting these shows on together for years all around the world to support artists as a starting point, and then say, okay, what can you build here to build more value for artists and really grow live revenue pie for them. That was the vision behind it. So the article you'd mentioned, when Sofar went from pass the hat, where basically everyone was showing up for free, they're collecting money and giving it to the artists and covering expenses. There was a company saw nothing, to selling tickets. They started off paying artists, each of the artists, I think $50. Then they were paying them, quickly adjusted it, paying them $100 a set. That it was $100 per artist per set for a 25-minute set when the financing was announced. So $25 million on one side, $100 for a 25-minute gig on the other side. That was the article. The reality is, I should have acted on this sooner. But if you break down the economics of a Sofar, you've got 58 people on average paid in a room, at about a little less than $20 average ticket price. So whatever, there's about $1,200 in the room. There's insurance, there's the PRO fees, there's the transaction costs on the ticketing side. Anywhere we're selling tickets, we have full-time and part-time staff there as well, the staffing of the shows. So when you get through those costs, there's about $575 left. Occasionally we have sound people. A lot of times we don't, but we have kind of a blended cost for sound and lights and water and some other that go in that cost basis too. Ends up with $300 go out to the artist. Sofar walks in a given show with about $275 on average is where it came out. So
pretty transparent, man. I appreciate that.
Well, no, this is where I messed up. So that article came out. I didn't want to get into Twitter beef. I didn't say anything, and it took us a while. But I was having this conversation directly with artists, and when you walk them through the economics of what's in a 60 cap room, and you're not selling booze, there's not a ton of money in the room. It was clear. I talked.
You got PRO fees too. I mean, you didn't even mention your fixed costs, your overhead, and all those types of things.
That's right. That's outside of the central cost. So what I did is I just sent an email to 30,000 artists and said, "Here's how the money works at our shows."
So let me just get this straight, because most CEOs don't do this. So a shitty article, so an article comes out, right? You read it, and then there was a kerfuffle, and then you send out an email to 30,000 artists saying, here's
6 months passed in between that I shouldn't have let pass. Because there's a question around, okay, you're a private company.
Yeah.
Do you just do you, do you just lay all that out there? Will your investors be cool with it? Like, is that a secret? And eventually I got to a point where having conversations with artists, it was very clear that when you lay it out, artists are smart. They look at it and say, okay, cool, it makes sense. So I felt like I needed to do that and probably should have done it sooner. So what we ended up doing is I laid that out. We have a advisory board of musicians, and those are basically people who play a lot of shows, and said, okay, it ended up being about a 63% of net to artists, the way that we had it priced before. And I felt like, okay, we can have a sustainable business at 70% of net as a target. And we're not going to just do a door deal. So you're guaranteed $100. Like, we're not, if we do smaller shows,
Yeah.
I'm going to go below that. But we now have tiered compensation from 100 to over 150 based on how many tickets we sell. And we're transparent that our, that basically that averages out to 70% of net is what we're targeting, which I think you compare that to any opening slot you're going to get in a room of that size where you're not expected to draw one person. It's a better deal than anything I've ever seen.
Of course.
So, but it took me too long to lay that out clearly. And I think that's on me.
We should talk about that for 1 second. I mean, like it's, and this is a key thesis of all the work that I do, like ethics can be a competitive advantage. And I don't mean like in the kind of, Aristotelian sense of the word. It's just like I can't teach someone how to be a good person. I can show, or I can't advise a company on how to do it. I can show how transparency builds what I call ethical fiber, brand loyalty, brand equity, which in an overly commoditized world where there are competitors to Sofar Sounds, right? That brand equity is going to keep people to stick with you when they could go to some sort of substitute. But you gotta be transparent. And companies that can't be transparent, you kind of have to wonder what the hell's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's where, in this case, I think the sooner, that's what I saw in what we did, is that level of transparency and clarity. It's just treating your customers with like a level of respect that comes back, and I think it's been really positive. And since then, we've released a bunch of artist-focused features. Same thing, kind of lay them out, talk about what's coming up on the roadmap. We get good feedback. So I feel like that artist as customer orientation, over the last year, we've made a lot of progress there. I think we still have plenty of work to do. I mean, definitely there are all kinds of elements of the show experience for artists, particularly how we help artists convert listeners in the room to fans.
Yeah.
We could do a better job. Like
but that's the KPI for everything, right? Conversion. But again, it goes back to that kind of purpose or values or whatever. That's a cultural thing. That's a value element that COVID's not going to change. In fact, it could maybe open up opportunities. Now, your value is to help artists create sustainable careers. Okay. I mean, we used to do that with vinyl and CDs or whatever. All those things are gone. So, maybe there's a way. I want you to keep kind of going through the economics up to that point, and then what's happened since then. How have those values kind of carried through?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we made the decision in March to shut down all shows, we basically canceled over 1,000 shows. I think it was like 1,500 shows. And that meant 3,000 artist cancellations around the world. To your point around ethics, I mean, 75% of the people who work at Sofar are musicians. So they look at the world through the lens of musicians, right? They are, it's who they are. So that orientation isn't something that you need to force. It's just how people see the world. So we looked at it and said, okay, we just stopped doing shows. What actions can we take right now? The first thing we did, first of all, turns out it's not that easy to cancel 1,500 shows. Like operationally, it took us like a week to communicate that to everybody, to handle that side of it. After that, we decided to advance the show payments to all the artists. So we reached out to all of them and basically said, we're going to pay you for these shows. We know they're canceled. These are artists that are playing small cap rooms. We just got some survey. We just hit people up the other day, did a follow-up survey. A majority of them are making most of their money as musicians. And as you know, chances are they're not doing it through publishing or sound recording revenue. They're probably doing it through live and teaching.
What is sound recording revenue?
Not gonna bite. I'm not gonna bite on that one. That's the bonus round at the end. So we felt like, look, I mean, $100 isn't going to change anybody's life, but if we can make a statement by saying we'll advance you this fee, and when we're back to doing shows, we'll hit you up and hopefully get you back in. But it is a very loose handshake that you're probably better off with this money right now than we are. So that was one thing that we could do. The second thing we did is I had just hired a Berkeley alum by the name of Matthew Santiago, I'll give a shout out to now, to head up production at Sofar. As I mentioned before all this, we were shooting about 10 performances a night around the world. Those were recorded, mixed down, distributed to YouTube. This grew over years and years. You could probably imagine it's a pretty operationally crazy situation where you got AV folks from all over the world and you're shooting in people all different languages. How do you get
like
on
a nightmare?
It's miraculous that it all happened. When I arrived, 0 employees. It was just kind of happening. So Matthew joined to work with Amanda and the operations team to just basically get our production side of things tighter, right? Sound and lights the night of the show, and then also on the audio and video side of things, how can we increase the quality, make it more efficient, make it quicker from when we shoot to that being up on YouTube. Changed our YouTube partner, our distribution partner there, strengthen our relationship with YouTube. Matthew's there.
So hold on, just so that I can quantify. So this is all, so COVID hits, you cancel all the shows because of your values, you pay the artists who were booked X point a week, whatever. I'm sure that was a fun conversation with your investors. And then it's like, okay.
They were totally down.
I believe it because I know who your investors are. And then it's like, okay, so now we have to essentially revision our business, go from something that, if I heard you right, was it like 0 to building out this whole kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, I should be clear here. I had hired a couple of folks on the video production side of things, including Matthew, before this happened, with a view towards, hey, first half of this year, we've got to get our video operations into an even better place. It's great we got a YouTube channel with 1 million subs, but it could be a lot bigger, and we could be providing a lot more value around those videos.
Okay, so this is the whole COVID as an accelerant thing. You were kind of doing this anyway, and now it's like, no, now this is all we're doing.
So what Matthew thought he had 6 months to do, he ended up with
6 days.
Right. So we launched the listening room, an online listening room, where we are doing live streams of artists, Sofar artists from all around the world, between 1 and 3 a day in different time zones. Artists, we originally were looking at doing those in video production hubs, but pretty quickly we realized we've got to be able to do these from wherever these artists are. So an artist can perform from their home or wherever they're comfortable. The listening room, we're then promoting to about 5 million people across our socials, email, YouTube subscribers, and creating that stage for artists. For fans, those are free to watch. And it's optional donation, kind of like a Sofar Pass the Hat.
So I wanna bust in here, if I may, that what you're explaining here, Jim, is what a lot of artists are doing, and that's the new normal now. And the questions that I'm getting now are: what's going to go on with the streaming? Will this be the new normal, where people get their music on live streams? And is there a way to, like George is adamant about, artists should do that without, they should not do that free. They should get paid for that. And you got so far, so you're virtual. Everybody had to move to this world now. But for my managers and the Berkeley students and all the people listening to this, where are we going? Is this the new normal? Should we all be working on monetizing music, the live experience online? Is this here to stay?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I have a few data points that I can share and kind of where our thinking is on it. We certainly don't have all the answers. For us, we are featuring in the listening room Sofar artists. So they typically have an engaged fan base, but probably if they've got 10,000 followers on socials, that's probably on the high end, right? So it's a bit of their audience, and then some of the Sofar global audience from the promotion that we're doing are coming to these streams, and about a few thousand views you're seeing for these half-hour sets. That said, I've been pleasantly surprised that with a suggested donation only, and we did build it's like 2 clicks to pay, very, very easy while you're watching a stream in the chat. Donate now to support the artist. You click on that, and it's very, very, doesn't take you off the stream. So we made that pretty slick and easy. On average, artists are making $650 US for a 30-minute set. And the average donation size is $20. Many artists are seeing over 1,000, so I expected that to be first week and then it would drop off.
Yeah.
We've seen that now, who knows how, if this is sustainable for the next 12 months or beyond, but we haven't seen that. We've seen that for internet size, small audience, in the 1,000 or so range, engaged in that performance, some of whom are clearly that artist fans, because you can feel it in the chat. And then the global Sofar audience, I mean, you'll see all 6 continents represented in almost every live stream on the audience side of things. That's real money for artists. We don't take a cut of that, and we actually pay artists a $100 fee to do them for right now, and that's all great, right?
So
But
let me just understand. So I mean, the per unit economics of that are great, right? And I'm sure like a multiple of what the per unit economics of it on someone playing a non-live event, because you got no costs attached to it, right? But there's a scale issue there, right? Like, I mean,
right, that's right. So right now, we can create a stage for 3 artists a day if we do, if we're doing 3 live streams in a day. Whereas before, when we were doing show, we would create a stage for 300 artists in a given night in the world, right? So that's a scale issue as far as our breadth of impact for artists, and then also from a business standpoint. So does it make sense for me to take a 20% cut of your $600 as a business? It's going to sting for you, and it's not going to make a difference for us.
Not going to make a lick of difference for you. So what you found then in this little sort of microcosm or micro study is that the customers are willing to pay a little higher than you thought, and or maybe a lot higher than you thought, and that there seems to be some durability. It wasn't just some like, okay, it's going to rocket up and then fall down. And now your issue is, well, how the hell do we scale? Because I'm sure you're curating too, right? You're picking artists that you think they've got to have some KPI. It's like, well, you're not going to get on our main room unless you have Y number of followers or something, right?
It's deliberately not driven by reach. We made that conscious decision.
Well, that's interesting. So it's just taste?
It's a combination of a few factors. It's number one, we're a global company with a global community of diverse artists. So you should be able to look at the week schedule, and artists from all over the world should be represented, and similarly from musical style standpoint. So that is the programming goal. If there are artists that we know, right? There are artists that we've worked with before that have played Sofars before. We wanted to bias towards artists who've been canceled to some degree, but deliberately we made the decision that we don't have a superstar strategy here, right? It's not about reach. There are plenty of people who are doing that. That's not core to who our artists are. It's mostly about trying to reflect that diversity and work with artists, that artists that have played a fair number of Sofars, and wherever you are in the world, the local Sofar folks are like, this is an artist that y'all should check out. What we found is another filter is just production and comfort with doing this, right? Because we can't be in the room with you. So Matthew has had to figure out how you do a pre-production check with an artist in different parts of the world and change settings on their laptop, mic placement, all that type of thing. And then go so far as like the infrastructure, apparently, the internet in Istanbul is not great for a 30-minute live stream. So the artists in Istanbul decided last minute, you know what? She pre-recorded like half hour before the set and then pushed it out. So we're learning that stuff in real time.
Sure.
But the production side of things is real, it is that,
for all of us.
You
But
know,
sorry, Rob. Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
this Wednesday, I taught my intro to music business course, and I had my friend David Wax from the David Wax Museum. It's a band that's been
I
around
know them. Yeah.
for about 13 years. And they played Newport Folk Festival. They have a really solid career. And Dave and his wife Suze go around the world and they play their music, sometimes with 3 people backing them. And he said every night for the past couple of weeks, they've been playing shows from their house with David and Suze, and they open it up and they get 200-300 of their fans every night. And like a lot of people are doing, and it's free. He said the last 2 months, what they made from donations were the most profitable months of their 13-year career. I think the fans want to support them. We want to support our artists, take advantage of a perfectly good crisis. And for touring the world for 13 months, for 13 years, and had the last 2 months the most profitable months of their career by doing shows in their attic studio, I think that's really telling. And I think a lot of artists are understanding this, and they're going right to their fans, and the fans are supporting them. And that's what, so far
It took them so fucking long. Like, I mean, all these intermediary, like, so I mean, it's an accelerant. The question becomes, is it durable? Like, will the fan, as humans, we're all being hit in lots of different ways. Is it scalable, as Jim's saying? And then I think the thing that nobody's really talking about enough is this skeuomorphism, right? Which is taking an offline thing and then trying to replicate it online, which never works. And so on one hand, you've got Willie Nelson, love him to pieces, doing his 420 thing, back on 420, which was just like, what the hell is that? Because you're trying to just enjoy Willie Nelson and do whatever, but you keep getting bombarded by give to the first responders, which of course I don't need to be reminded of that. And then on the other hand, you've got Travis Scott coming onto Fortnite as an animated monster and having 12 million concurrent viewers and selling Lord only knows how many skins and emotes, because it's not skeuomorphic. And I don't know, and I'm looking to you, Jim, and others, like how are you going to reconcile? You cannot just take Sofar and say, yeah, now we're just going to do it online. That ain't going to work.
No, I mean, I think it's precisely why, I looked at this as an opportunity to give our artists a stage and keep engaging with them and keep our audience engaged during this period of time. Those live streams are not a replacement to a Sofar show. I think in many cases, the value of a Sofar show is that your phone is down, and that this is a distinctly analog, in-person, organic, connective experience, right? And so I agree with you that being more deliberate, I guess, first of all, being more deliberate in understanding the artist and their art and that artist's audience, to look at how you can create a digital experience that's elevated, right? And I think like the Travis Scott example is like the obvious kind of example of that. There are lots of other examples of that. And I think there are interesting technologies that aren't fully ready for prime time yet. Real-time collaboration has a speed of light problem, like that's not there yet. But you get a lot more people thinking about how to create improvisational type of experiences, and that will work for certain types of artists in a medium that elevates that for their audiences too. So I think I completely agree that it's not like every artist can take what they were doing offline and just put it online. It's going to work. I think in many cases so far, there's interesting challenges as to how we do that. To both of your examples on the artist side of things, what you're seeing now is an expression of fan appreciation and
Yeah.
support,
Yeah.
like you see on a Patreon or other places too, right? I think that doesn't address the question: how does an artist, a typical Sofar artist, who's organically building their fan base, a dozen fans at a time by playing to 60 people, how do you build a fan base in those types of in this type of situations? We can play a small role, but I think that is an open question, and I don't frankly have a great answer for it. For artists with an established fan base over this period of time, you can remain engaged. You can probably monetize that, and how I think whenever things come back on the live side in a more patchy way, there will be, I think, a better playbook around how the digital experience can augment or maintain some engagement alongside the live experience. But I think it comes down to knowing who the artist is and how they like to create and who their audience is, to make sure that how you're doing that is in a way that makes it feel like a better experience, not a worse one. And we know
Right.
all seen ones that are not better than the real experience, right?
This is an important point, right? I mean, like, we all on this call, at least that I'm looking at, are all old enough to remember when Radiohead did the In Rainbows thing, right? And that was this sort of seismic 0 to 1 thing that rippled through the industry. And then every artist was like, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to let my customers name their own price. And it was like, well, that didn't work at all for you because you're not Radiohead. And it's just like the Travis Scott Fortnite thing. It's like, well, I'm going to do that too. No, you're not. But it's the strategy of colliding things together and innovation then ripples down to tactics. So just like you said, that in Rainbow's moment for Radiohead, only they could kind of do that. But it didn't stop Zoe Keating from saying, okay, well, now I'm going to have a price point here, but you can give more. And just like you're saying with Sofar. So that kind of ethos has matriculated the way down. No, artists are not going to be able to go like, yeah, now I want to be on Fortnite. But they can look to that as a strategic kind of value of, I'm going to collide other things together rather than just thinking in this very kind of box-like structure, and look for adjacencies or orthogonal things, whether it's health or relaxation or calm, and get back to kind of the job to be done of music. What is it that people need right now at this point? And how can Sofar sort of be the tool that disseminates that? And what you have is this amazing platform to experiment with.
Yeah, and I think when in thinking about what you were just saying, maintaining a connection with your fan base, people want that connection right now. Your fan base wants that connection. One of the specific areas that I think the current state of affairs is pretty poor at is the feel of connection during the performance, right? I mean,
That kind of ambient space.
a chat room flying by is
right.
not the answer yet. And I think there are, on different social platforms, there are kind of different examples of that. But how your presence and your connectedness with other fans that are sharing that experience at the same time, how can you make that feel more real, is I think one of the areas we are messing with in a pretty lo-fi way. But I think there is a lot of opportunity there. And all those things go back to having a kind of comparatively small fan base that is really passionate and wants to support you, and having an ongoing dialogue with them, which is what fan funding platforms have been doing, and I think have grown from the radio example. In this environment that we're in, I think that is a sustainable opportunity. And to Ralph, your point, George, your point, and talking to other managers, some who are probably on this call, like, everything doesn't need to be a benefit right now, right? Like it is a time where if you do connect with your families, I think for the most part, they want to support you, they want to engage you. So those big reach benefit live stream opportunities, they're great for something else. But I think there are opportunities to, we've seen that in an opt-in basis, not a kind of ticketed prior to basis, that people will opt in.
You have to
hopefully-
provide elegant organization, right? You have to provide the opportunity, as you said, opt in or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think we as people who are musicians and who care about, I mean, there needs to be blood on the street at this point about certain elements of the music industry. And the first one needs to be about the ongoing devaluation and use of music as a loss leader. Like it's just, I know where it ends, and it ain't good, right? It ain't good for humanity, not just for us. But like what little buds have you seen, if any, percolating up in terms of these lo-fi type of, because that's the thing that I think is missing too. Like when you're at a live show, you know, it's a Clark's Law or whatever, sufficient technology is indistinguishable from magic. Like everything else just sort of disappears. And sometimes online that can happen, right? But like what examples, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you think of any moments like, oh yeah, we hadn't thought of that, but that actually seems to be kind of working, right? Because it seems like you're a very, you know, a leader or CEO, whatever, that is doesn't have that sort of innovator's dilemma thing of like, no, I know the way. It seems more like we're going to test and experiment. So I'm wondering what's kind of coming back, if anything you can think of.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it depends on. I've seen artists who use the media. I mean, if you think about it, the technology as a medium has always basically been part of the art that's created back, forever. I mean, it's all the same thing, right? And so now there are new constraints. From big bands, LPs, 45, whatever. It's all part of the medium. I think similarly here, the constraints of doing one of these creates opportunities too. And sure. I've seen, because you can't do real-time collaboration, some of the kind of layering type of approaches and asynchronous collaboration that can take place and then be presented to people. There's a lot of cool stuff there that I think there's more creativity there. I talked to someone at the Media Lab who's focused a lot on distributed collaboration and creativity. And his answer was there are about 100 things that make that collaboration not feel organic yet, and it's going to be the one that grinds through the most of them to kind of get there. But I do think that there is a level of creative interactivity. There's already some asynchronously, and ways to try that, and ways that could involve the audience in some ways too. I think there are things that are coming.
Good. Yeah, good. Ralph, you wanted to kind of talk about the industry?
Well, one of the questions, like today I sent a article off the gym about, it was from the New York Times. It says the small clubs are where rock history is made. How many will survive? Here in the Boston market, one of our—
I heard the Troubadour is going to go down.
And that's what they say. And then Great Scott's here. And it's just like, it's like these businesses need bodies to come and drink beer and to support their artists. And I've had probably 5 questions about, will this dry up? Will the small clubs go away? And will the live music be just the big monsters in the room, the AEGs, the Live Nations of the world that have bank accounts that could sustain through this time? So that's a big concern to a lot of people, because a lot of our artists play little rooms. And I would love to hear your opinion of that. The smaller infrastructure of music for live music, not house concerts, but the small venues that we love and are beloved, will they survive? Can they survive this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's a question I'm not comfortable answering in the definitive, but I share the same fear. I mean, I think in some ways, what attracted me to Sofar in the first place was it felt like a grassroots response to the fact that that's already been happening. And if you lived in this town for 20 years or spent much time in New York or anywhere on the East Coast, it's a pretty hostile, a big city right now. It's a pretty hostile place for a small venue that likes to book eclectic, weird stuff with a cover where people feel comfortable walking in and discovering new things, right? That's been really, really hard. It's hard to survive beforehand. That said, I am I don't know what it looks like, but I am not at all concerned that that world goes away. Now, on an individual basis, I'm not discounting how hard it's going to be for some of these folks to weather the storm. You know, they're not lucky. They don't have investors like I do and or Sofar does and some other folks do. So I'm not discounting how hard it's going to be for them. But listen, people are still going to want to see that band before you did. You know, I saw Gary Clark Jr. at Great Scott a few years ago, and Santiago dragged me to the show. And those experiences,
Yeah.
that's not going away, right? How these venues navigate their overhead and the new restrictions and all the uncertainty to get to the other side of this, it's going to be really difficult. I left that article encouraged that those venues are banding together and they're finally getting some visibility from a policy standpoint, and because they are they're the soul of every one of our cities.
Yeah. And then,
But look, I think that it'll be a different world, but I'm not concerned about the fact that those spaces, they're going to exist, because that's just a critical, there's demand, right? There's demand on the artist side. There's absolutely demand on the audience side.
mhm. I like, and then another question I have is, and I love to ask this question, and I'll ask it to start out with George. George, if you were a full-time manager and you have signed your band from Berkeley who wants to go out there and do good things, how would you consider having a chance of the music going through and this band having a success?
I would be looking for every possible adjacency. In other words, I'd be looking for that kind of what I call in my consulting firm, that kind of mirror of desire. What is it about the music that my artist makes that is making someone feel better about him or herself? And then look for other things outside of traditional revenue streams, whether that is in health, in video games, in VR, and I don't know, in adjacent and orthogonal things. I have long thought that the role of the artist manager is business development, and that means strategic partnerships. That means, just like Universal did a thing with Lego. I think that's really smart, and again, I think this is all an accelerant. It's going to force people. I've been saying for years now that unless we expand the total addressable market for ways in which artists can make money beyond just kind of the pittance that they're getting from the DSPs, and now with live being, and we're not even talking about merch. I mean, most merch sales are at live shows. So you have to then think about what are some other revenue streams and sort of diversify the portfolio. I think it comes from, and that's what I meant about like the Travis Scott Fortnite thing. No, you're not going to be able to do that. But a good manager is going to go, wait, I think that there's some other test, some other thesis that I can do. And importantly, be careful with your pricing, right? There's no, the government is mandating the mechanical rate, which hasn't changed in 16 years, which again, blood on the streets. But there's no yet set pricing for music licensing into VR or whatever. The number one VR game over and over and over again is Beat Saber. It's not coincidental that it's really the only one that has licensed in music. There's tremendous opportunity for that around all these types of collisions. So if I'm a music manager right now with a particular new artist, I am looking for any type of partnership that I can get to try to find that most passionate percentage of a total addressable market, and then seeing if those people are telling their friends through some sort of net promoter score, and then rinsing and repeating.
And Jim, I know you have your little meetings with managers, Dalton and all our friends here. What are the smart managers that you're talking to doing these days to kind of help their artists go to market?
Yeah, I think monetizing the relationship with your existing fans through live stream and an ongoing conversation is, I think, what's the common thread there. I think there's a tension between the big reach opportunities where there's probably not a lot of money or no money versus an artist who's connecting with their fan base in a way where they can get paid. This feels like a great time for fan funding platforms because there's more, I think on the audience side of things, there's more time to engage and there's more of a willingness. So if you look at it like a funnel of your fans, I think for the ones who are in the funnel and are your fans today, I think weaving live streaming video into a relationship that you're monetizing through a fan funding type of relationship is, I think it's working, and can continue to grow. If that, when you're talking about an artist who doesn't yet have that fan base, right, or is looking to grow the fan base, I think it's frankly it's really difficult right now because there's a lot of noise out there. At Sofar, I think that one of the most underutilized, incredible assets that we have is connecting artists. So I think the opportunity to collaborate with other artists and what was gig swapping before to cross promote and double bill and find other ways to grow your fan base through connecting with other artists that are about at your stage with comparable fan bases. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that, and we want to help facilitate more of that to help artists grow their fan bases, but by doing it by helping each other out.
You know, I was on a panel once with Hugo Burnham, who was
Gang of Four.
Gang of Four drummer, and he's a wonderful guy. And I remember him when the panel was doom and gloom about you know, the end of this and the death of this and whatnot. Hugo said, you know something, there's always some kid in their bedroom that's going to be the next John Lennon, the next Kurt Cobain, the next Charlie Puth, whatever it is. There's genius all over this globe, and that's what excites me, because there's people with music and a presentation that is unique and amazing, and it's out there, and that's what keeps me involved, and that's what keeps people going to Berklee of fostering this and growing this business, because I think, as we know, music's really important. It's a really, really important thing. We're a little bit of, we're just out of time, but I want final words as far as where we're going, where the hope is, where should we be focused, and things like that. You want to start off, George? Come on, George.
Look, I'll end where we started. In any time like these, it's best to recalibrate with respect to purpose, not product, and that distribution method, that the marketplace is always going to sort of shift and change, as long as you're doing that thing that makes somebody else feel better about him or herself because of what you're doing. The market for that is infinite. Scaling it, distribution, monetization, all of those things follow and flow from that kind of product market fit that Jim found. The innovation right now will come from people like Jim, who's close to his market. It will not come from the Universal Records, the BMI, the ASCAPs. It will come to sort of build off of what Hugo came from, talked about, some kid, and probably it will be someone who is both a musician and a technologist, and she's sitting in her room and she has nothing left to lose, and then she becomes Billie Eilish.
Yeah, thank you. Jim, your thoughts, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just go back to the fact that it's so clear that audiences want to engage with people who are making art right now as much or more so than ever. And that demand's never going to change. How it gets met is going to evolve, and it already has. It's changed a lot, but that's not going away. So that you operate in a business where what we sell, that connection between humans around art, is never going to go away, which means that there are opportunities. There are plenty of opportunities around, and it's just about, in our view, testing things out, learning, and then just doing the work to find what the right connection is. But yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the world looks like as we start coming out of this in some way, but what I do know is that demand, audiences demand to connect with musicians, discover great new music, hip their friends to it, connect with the artists that create that art. That's not going anywhere.
Thank you. When I was doing commercial real estate and I became the real estate broker for Newbury Comics here, a chain here in Boston, and Mike Drees, who was one of the founders, became a very dear friend of mine. And he had an expression that if you're the smartest person in a room, you're getting the wrong advice. So thanks to George and thanks to Jim for these are two really smart people that are in there. They're in the trenches. So I thank you for your time, your expertise. Jim Lucchese, George Howard, thank you. Thank you to Dan and Brittany and all the people that are involved in this. And for all those people that are listening, thank you. I would like to do this more often. I don't want to burn you out, but we could do this virtually. And, I'd love to see you again.
Ralph, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Good night.